Welcome to the Cowpart Bros podcast. I'm your host, Terrence. Is with me is my co-host, Jason, calling in for the back cave in Indianapolis. Jason, how are you, my good man?
So Terrence just lied. I'm actually not in Indianapolis, as some people might be able to tell from the background. A little bit different, but it's all good. Add some flair to it. With a little flag behind me. Giving it up for bros. But anyway, it's episode 76, bro. The road to 100. Got 3 good topics today. Let's get into it.
Yes, sir. Jason, that background totally could have been in some damn old-ass basement in Gary, Indiana. Don't lie.
Illinois, son. Illinois.
Yeah, he's a little more local than usual, but his ass still ain't over here. Anyways, thank you for listening. This is episode 76. For the uninitiated, Cowpart Bros is the podcast to hear. We are a weekly podcast for fans of sports, current events, and entertainment.
And as always, we are your hosts, Terrence and Jason. And every single Thursday, we come to you with a brand new episode where we discuss the current events of the day, sports, and the athletes we love.
And even some of the athletes we loathe. No matter the topic, you expect a brutally honest and fun exchange of snark while learning through the lens of our 30 years of friendship that originated in Calumet Park, Illinois.
And folks, for more Cowpart Bros content, make sure you connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok under the handle Cowpart Bros or Cowpart Bros Podcast for more behind the scenes of the show and just to engage with us every single day. But do not forget that the Cowpart Bros Podcast is available to subscribe and listen for free wherever you listen to podcasts.
Like us, love us, share us, follow us. And folks, if you like us, hell, why wouldn't you?
That's right, folks. Like Terrence said, we are the podcast to hear and watch. So make sure you're living it, loving it, and doing it.
All right. Getting into the nitty gritty. Segment 1, Brett Favre. Brett Favre's post-retirement Q rating wasn't all that great, Jason. But with the news out of the welfare scandal about 2 weeks ago, it just keeps dropping, man. Like, dog, I don't want to see you in another Wrangler commercial. It's a wrap.
Well, depending on how all that stuff goes down, he may not have to have that opportunity in the first place. So now he's not been convicted of anything yet, but the writing may be on the wall.
Yeah, I think, and folks, just for those that may not be well versed in what we're discussing, Brett Favre, as part of an investigation, was discovered to have contributed to some sort of welfare fraud, for actually getting, fraudulently procuring some money for where his daughter attends college. And so that's the real sticking point, right? Is because, you have a lot of politicians and talking heads on media talk about welfare queens. And then lo and behold, it's Mr. Wrangler himself that is front and center. And I mean, Brett Favre made well over $100 million in his career, Jason. If anybody doesn't need the money, it's him.
Well, now we'll probably get into this, but the money that was misappropriated, we'll say, wasn't for him to pocket the money per se. It was to use it for basically for means that weren't the purpose of the money in the first place, But to that point, yeah, whatever money he was used for what he used it for could have come out of his own pocket, but it didn't. So
yeah, and I think from my vantage point, those are one and the same. It's even more dastardly because one he's so involved anyway. And so for all those people that have said that, oh, there's too much focus going on other more salacious news. I mean, this is front and center for us. We just talked about the Jackson, Mississippi water crisis. So our focus is front and center on this clear abuse of power and access. And he was just the biggest name, right? There were other individuals caught up in this investigation. He just happened to be the biggest name.
Well, biggest name based on the public eye. I mean, it could be argued that some of the people other involved may be bigger names when it comes to their status, when it comes to Mississippi. I don't want to say government, but their status in Mississippi. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and say Mississippi government. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's one thing for Brett Favre to do all this. I almost want to say it's probably worse for those government officials to be involved with it because you're trusted to run those programs ethically and within the binds of the law. Where Brett Favre is just some Joe Schmo, essentially, who happened to be along for the ride, who was just a happy medium in a way for them to start misappropriating funds. You know, um, yeah. And now, just to be clear, people, just in case you also weren't aware, the money that was used, or rather, money that was given to Brett Favre, was used for new facilities for the volleyball program, the women's volleyball program, perhaps at his alma mater, Southern Mississippi University, which is also happens to be where his daughter plays volleyball, the same school. So it is all pretty convenient. Also, I was reading something earlier that some of that money may have been used to potentially not that it was given to this recruit, but when it comes to promising facilities being made, it was a way to lure Deion Sanders' son to play for Southern Mississippi University. Again, they weren't giving the money to Deion or his son. It was the money it was going to be used to build facilities that would draw him to come to the school there. So, um, one thing I do want to point out, not that it matters, and we may get into this, that one thing, of course, when you think about this, you're like, okay, if Brett Favre did this, jail time. Again, we can go further into that later, but one aspect I do want to point out is that Brett Favre, once this was found out, supposedly he gave the money back. Now he didn't give it back with the interest on time. Apparently, there was a deadline involved. We had to pay the money back, so he paid the money back, but not the interest involved. And that's when all this information was turned over to the authorities, and obviously how it came to the public knowledge and awareness. Despite the fact that it's not being talked about very much compared to some other stories that we'll get into later. Um, but again, that can always change once certain shoes drop when it comes to indictments and things like that. But I wanted to point that out real quick. Not that that should change anybody's opinion. I'm sure it doesn't change yours about anything, or does it?
Well, Jason, I had a question. So you mentioned there was a whole process in which he had to pay the money back. Um, you already mentioned that this is not a criminal matter, at least not yet, anyway. So so my follow up question then is, was that like part of the process? Is that um was this like a civil lawsuit, like basically stating that him specifically, or that multiple individuals had like a certain time frame to get the money back?
So I can't speak to if it was more than just him, because obviously these articles are going to be talking about him as opposed to any other individual. Going back to what I was saying before is yes, he's the biggest name in the public eye, so every story is going to be about him. At least as far as on the national media sites anyway. I'm sure Mississippi sites are bringing up other people. But this article that I saw that in which I saw the about the payback, which I believe was CBS Sports, even though it's not a sports story, was talking about him paying back the money. It was $500,000 and another $600,000 that he paid back, which again didn't include the interest he was supposed to pay back as well. So whatever the deadline was for him to pay that back, because he didn't pay the interest part, that's when the powers that be said, "Well, we'll pass this along to the authorities." It doesn't seem like I had to reread that part, but it doesn't seem like it was part of a civil lawsuit, unless you're finding that out right now. But it could have been just whoever he took the money from say, "Hey, give it back." Well, I'm not even going to speculate on that, but it could be just the people he took the money from to say, "Hey, give it back," and we'll call it square potentially. So, well, obviously he didn't do that. So now also Brett Favre's claiming that he didn't know that the money was supposed to be like he didn't know. He says he didn't know it was welfare money, which there's some text messages out there that got
What
revealed.
do you think it
During
was? Cold cash?
Well, yeah, probably. But the problem with that though is there's some text messages that came out probably during this investigation from 5 years ago, August 2017, that may indicate that even if he didn't know if it was welfare money, he probably knew that it wasn't money that he was supposed to be getting. I mean, in those text messages, the very first text bubble that shows is from him. Let me pull this back up here. It says, "If you were to, there you go. If you were to pay me this money, is there any way that basically the media would find out where it came from and how much?" And again, this text or message are all out there. CBS Sports, Twitter. You can go see the messages. But there's 3 or 4 more text bubbles in there that indicate from the individual with the Mississippi government that, hey, don't worry about us, blah 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 blah. We'll get taken care of, so forth and so forth. But that first bubble indicates that he knew Brett Favre from what it was seen, without having anything else before or after it, that he knew if it wasn't welfare money, that he knew that it wasn't probably money that he should be getting, since he's worried about the media finding out and so forth and
He's
so
worried
forth.
about the paper trail, which is ironic because here he is texting, oh boy. Um, and what I suspect this is boiling down to is that whoever he was interacting with, there's heat on him now to effectively to turn the to drop the dime on this on Brett Favre, because at that level, if you're at that conversation of that level with whoever was involved, the chances are it's every man, woman, and child for themselves.
I believe the person that he was talking to at that point in that text messaging session was Nancy New in EW, and I believe she may have been the governor of Mississippi back at that point. I will confirm that as you're talking.
Okay, give me 1 second. 3, 2, 1. All right. So I'm curious what you're referencing, because when I'm looking at this article, it's referencing a governor named Phil Bryant. And for all I know, hell, there might be multiple text messages, by the way.
So I misspoke. Nancy New isn't the governor. She's actually, well, was. She was the head of a nonprofit group and an education company. Um, and they pled guilty back in April, her and her son, to misappropriating funds that were supposed to go to, as the article mentioned from the Clarion Ledger, the poorest people in the nation of Mississippi. So that's who the conversation with Brett Favre was talking to, was Nancy New in particular. So she wasn't the governor, but basically she was somebody who, as we mentioned, was misusing public money and gave some of that money to Brett Favre. Um, so that's who Nancy New and her son Zachary New are. My bad on the governor part, but yes, Mr. Bryant, the governor, is involved as well.
And so, Jason,
When I say involved, they're in. He's part of the story.
he's in cahoots.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, they involved. They involved, dog. Yeah. It's not just. That's why I'm saying. I, and people can say that Brett Favre isn't a big name. Brett Favre, because of the shenanigans that he is already engaged in, both on the field and off the field, and also because of how this is eventually going to play out and the optics of siphoning off money when you've made $100 million, that's a crook of the first order.
You saying he's crooked?
I'm saying this is exactly the behavior I'd expect from somebody that was sending dick pics to reporters.
Kind of makes that seem a little tame now, doesn't it?
I mean,
Yeah, again, not playing the crime Olympics here, but
yeah, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is almost like a better human being by default now.
I'm not going to go into that argument there. We know how I feel about Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, let's let it go. Let that go.
But yeah, I do think that enough has come to light that, oh, he did that shit. Now, will anything ever happen of it criminally? Short answer, we don't know. I don't want to pontificate about what may happen with that, but we know enough did happen where clearly he had to walk back some shit and he had to get that money back.
I'm not afraid to go ahead and say that probably nothing's going to happen to him. If I'm wrong, great. But we've seen what happens here when it comes to he's not a current athlete. No, he's a former athlete. So there's that. I'm sure he has great lawyers. He may get convicted of this. Will there be any jail time? I had to bet not, because I mean, I hate to say this, he didn't kill anybody. He didn't sexually assault anybody. He didn't beat the shit out of anybody. So, yeah, and that's usually what athletes go to jail for. Is those three things. He didn't do any of that, right? And the fact that he paid the money back before even any criminal case came up, that could be a saving grace to say, well, once I found out I was wrong, I gave the money back. And I think that might be a saving grace when it comes to not going to jail. You may get probation, may get some type of other punishments, but keeping them out of jail or prison, I think that's going to be a saving grace.
Oh, and here's the hookup for New. And by the way, is that New was connected with a non for profit, and it just so happens that Brett Favre does several speaking engagements to the
No,
tune
no,
of
no.
one.
He was supposed to do those, but supposedly he never did them, which is also part of the problem. Basically, they paid him to do the speaking engagement, but he never did them. But they paid him anyway.
Right. Well, I was gonna chime in on that, but um, yeah, that's wild. I mean, you would. I'm speechless. I'm flabbergasted. I I just now found out by reading this that he never actually did the speeches. That's $1.1 million. Like, hell, this is probably why Biden got more company in the IRS these days, because the audits waiting to happen like this one.
Now he claims what he did was film some type of videos or commercials or some stuff like that. So, which I had to imagine there's got to be some evidence of that he did it. But yeah, exactly. Those speaking engagements that he was supposedly paid for on record never happened. So basically, stuff is doctored to say, hey, he did this stuff for me, but he never did it. So, um, yeah. So classic white collar crimes happening there.
Yeah, it's pretty shady, and it's shady. Rarely are these shady acts by one individual or two individuals. Usually, it's a team, right? So you see, a failure of the people of from the governor's office all the way down. And so while Brett Favre is the biggest name in this, there are there is a team of bastards involved in this. And like I said, these individuals, they're copping pleas now because they're trying to get as much heat off of them as possible, which is why I suspect Brett Favre's name even came up.
Oh, facts. Yeah, I mean, yeah. In the article I found from the Clarion Ledger, I mean, I'm sure other places, Nancy New and Zach say, we'll gladly testify against anybody else. Hey, here's some other information. Brett Favre, the shiny piece of all this. Hey, forget about me. Look at this over here, Brett Favre.
Ooh, a
Which
piece of candy. Ooh, a piece of
it,
candy.
exactly. And even though he may be a retired player and whatnot, in the state of Mississippi, Southern Mississippi, I'm sure he's a god basically because he's Brett Favre, made it to the league, doing stuff for the alma mater as well. The fact that he still lives at home, which I'm sure ingratiates himself even more. So yeah, I'd be doing the same thing. Throw him out there. Whatever happens to him, great. But hey, take the shine off of me a little bit. Give me a lighter sentence. That's fine because I gave you Brett Favre. So there you go. But yeah, but the one thing you mentioned about it takes a team to do stuff automatically reminded me of the Varsity Blues scandal, the USC admissions thing. I'm sure it wasn't just one person involved. Obviously, there's multiple parents involved. So clearly, yeah, I agree.
I wasn't sure if you meant the actual USC deal or the actual movie Varsity Blues. If you were
That
going
movie was a crime.
movies,
That movie was a crime itself to even be made. So yeah,
I love that movie. And if you were gonna use an actual um movie to show how the sausage is really made on the state level, you should have went with Blue Chips. Shout out to Nick Nolte.
well, I'll just say that's what they call that scandal in the media, the Varsity Blues thing. That's why I threw it out there. But I agree, Blue Chips would be a better representation of all this. But I think that was actually a better movie than Varsity Blues, even though people think that was worse. So, my opinion.
Fair enough. All right.
Check it out, folks. That movie had Shaq and Anthony Hardaway in it. Check it out.
Too much. All right, folks. That concludes our first segment on Brett Favre welfare scandal. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about the accomplishments of one Albert Pujols on Cal Park Bros.